Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for tuning in. My name is Jonas Makoni. I'm a member of Counterfire, and today I'll be speaking to Yaseen Aslam, who is the president of the App Drivers and Couriers Union, or the ADCU. Now, Yaseen is a former Uber driver who recently just won a landmark case against Uber in the Supreme Court, basically forcing Uber to treat their drivers as workers rather than self-employed independent contractors, which means that Uber drivers are entitled to basic workers' rights and protections such as the basic minimum wage, sick pay, and protection from discrimination. Um, Yassine, thank you very much for coming on today. I thought I'd just start off by quickly speaking about, if you could just start off by just quickly speaking about sort of the background of the case and how you got to this point, basically.
Yeah, sure. Hi, thank you. So just a quick little clarification. So we won the worker status. Now in the UK, we have three employment status. You have a self-employed, you have a worker, a limby worker they call it, and then we have an employee. So as a worker, you're still like in a way self-employed, but you're entitled to certain rights such as holiday pay, minimum wage, the right not to be discriminated against or whistleblowing protection. It doesn't include sick pay. Okay, but other than that, I actually come into this industry back in 2006 when I started working as a private hire driver. We hear this word gig economy a lot, yeah, but the trade actually existed well before Uber. So since Uber come, people started talking about it, and I actually started working for Uber in 2013 when they first launched their Uber X service, and I was one of the first drivers that started working. So yeah, so around 2015, me and James filed a case. Well, I was the first one to file at ACAS level to a claim against Uber, and James also joined the claim, and we had a few other guys join at the same time. So 2016, we went into tribunal, and the tribunal also ruled that we were workers. And then since then, Uber been fighting us. So like immediately when we won in 2016, they put a email out to everyone and saying that the ruling only applies to two drivers, myself and James. Yeah, so then we went into the appeal tribunal. We won there. We then went to the High Court. Again, we won there. And then last year we were at the Supreme Court, which, so in February we won again. And then Uber immediately sent a statement out to all the drivers saying this ruling only applies to 25 people. so last week Uber saw some sense, and they classified all the workers as all the drivers as workers. So as of today, drivers are getting 15% more pay when they have a passenger in their car. Although the Supreme Court ruled that we're workers from the minute we turn the app on till the minute we turn the app off. So we're under Uber's control.
Yeah, I was wondering about that because I've seen you guys have criticized what Uber are doing with that thing that they're only paying people from when they're taking a passenger, basically. And I was wondering, like, isn't that kind of them breaking the law now? Like, are you encouraging drivers to basically bring forth claims about this?
I mean, immediately since when we won and when Uber made the announcement, we have been working with solicitors, and we had a lot of our drivers, members, and everyone. We've been pushing them to join the claim, and that's what really pushed Uber to come onto the table.
Yeah,
and sort of realize that they got a big, massive liability, and there's no way around. Like, they can't get out of it. They always knew from day one we were workers. So okay, let's just go on the assumption they didn't know, or there's some kind of misunderstanding. In 2016, that was all clarified at the tribunal level. Like, we had 1 week whole trial. I got cross-examined, Uber got cross-examined, everything. But they set that model up to the way they wanted to. And the whole idea was to try and get away. And one of the things behind it was they could afford not to obey the law. And the problem we have in this country, there's lack of enforcement. So we have these great laws like the worker status that I mentioned earlier on, been around for years. Nothing new. The national minimum wage been around for years. It's nothing new. And it's just like how an Uber's argument would be is they're technology company, and therefore because it's a technology company, the law shouldn't be applying to them, which doesn't make sense. So to me, it's the same whether I'm working for Uber, whether it's an app, whether it's a retail shop or whatever. You still like the law still apply, and that was confirmed in our case. Now, in our case, and the reason why everyone talks about this and how it impacts other workers is the judge and the courts actually went and looked at what was really happening, not just at contracts level, like what the contracts are. So they look willing to look at the real relationship and your working pattern in order to establish what your status is. And so what it does is it opens a flood where company that bogusly misclassify you, will get caught out a lot quicker now.
Yeah, and I remember seeing in the ruling that was something I thought was really interesting when they say like basically that Uber drivers, it's not just that they have decided that Uber drivers are now workers, but that Uber drivers have always been workers, and that Uber has tried to basically, the only reason that they have not been treated as workers is because Uber has sort of tried to cheat to not follow the law, basically. I was wondering if you could maybe on that point speak a little bit about what this means for other companies that operate similar business models. Like, are we seeing any movement there sort of in the
I mean, yeah, you're right. Over the coming days, we're going to see more and more thing. I mean, I'm glad that we were able to win this case and justice was served. Yeah, I mean, the bigger pattern, like we just got, I mean, and I'm not attacking Uber here, like companies that operate in similar models or within the gig economy. And I just want to say that I might just be referring to Uber, but you could apply the same thing for other stuff. So when you look at models like Uber, they know what they're doing. And I also sit on the international steering for drivers from 23 different countries. And we have the same problem in each and every country where the whole model is set around exploiting people. It's all about how do we tap, I mean, the workers, when you look at it, they're all from BME community, migrant workers, like they're people that are desperate, vulnerable, people that need an opportunity, a job. So what Uber does is they offer them some kind of opportunity, something, yeah. But at the same time, it's all about how they could go and build a mass, like how they could scale up in big numbers, yeah. So for example, the way Uber would operate is you come into a city, their cost is next to nothing. So whether they launch in Birmingham tomorrow or Manchester or another city, it costs them nothing. So it's all about trying to get as many drivers on the platform, and so there's an oversupply of drivers. And at the same time, keep reducing the fares, so you make the fares cheaper and cheaper. And what's happening is and I saw this myself, where when I started in 2006, the fares come down so much, yeah, and we're getting more and more drivers onto the platform. And unfortunately, I don't like saying this, but unfortunately, there would be drivers in London, forget any other city, just London, one of the richest cities in the world, yeah, that would work for £2 an hour, and they would be happy to work at that amount as a self-employed driver. And the reason being because they're desperate. They'll be grateful they got, but the law has a purpose, and the whole idea of having this national minimum wage, etc., and all these other like the worker status, it's there to protect these workers. It's there to stop companies like Uber from exploiting these workers, so no one they can't take advantage of these desperate people. So that's how all this was. So when they set their contract, it was exactly made in that way, in how they could deny these people rights. And they look for these BME workers, and the reason being is they would never come forward and resist, or they don't have the resources to challenge them. Now, in our case, we were lucky that we were strong, we were, what's that word, persistent and constant, we were constant, like Anna James, he was on board, we 2-3 guys, and we had a good team of drivers, the solidarity. We had solicitors that represented us on pro bono. Again, it's again, without the legal support, it's not possible for a worker to fight 6 years, 7 years in court, sacrifice their life against a company that got unlimited resources in a way. So and they know that, and that works in their advantage. So it's all about, when we talk, and I see a lot of drivers from different countries where they do protests, but they do 1 protest, 2 protests, and then suddenly disappear because they get burnt out. Yeah. So we were, and I'm glad we made it through. We fought them all the way. But the point is, they know this, and this is what they use to their advantage. And this is where the government have failed in enforcing these laws. So now it opens a can of worm for everyone, where all these other operators or companies within the gig economy would be looking at this model, thinking, yes, we're now exposed. And the best thing they could do is start correcting themselves now before they face a similar action such as Uber.
Yeah, that's interesting, and because what the ruling said kind of brings that home as well, that the fact that this has always been the law, but somehow Uber's just got away with it, or all these other companies have got away with this for this whole time, and no one's done anything about it. So I guess I was wondering what you think is kind of, I mean, this ruling in itself isn't going to change this whole system, like, just sort of overnight. Like, there's obviously going to have to be some kind of movement on behalf of the drivers and on behalf of the people that work in the industry. And that's what you guys are obviously doing with the ADCU, is sort of trying to take those first steps. So I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about what you think is kind of what we need to do in the short term, basically.
I mean, yeah, there's still a lot of work to do. This is just the start of something. I'm glad, like I said, it's some achievement, but at the same time, it's not everything. So going back to your main question, what's happening here is you've got all these companies, they could afford, and that's the word to use, afford not to obey the law. And then at the same time, like I said, there's lack of enforcement. So what we need to see is, and one of the stuff that we're trying to push is politicians to come forward, enforcement by the government, not looking at new laws or existing, because we got existing law that they're failing to enforce. So, like our campaign, sorry, excuse me. One of the things that we're trying to push for is, making sure that we could get drivers to be paid from the minute they logged on to the minute they logged on. So it's like me, if I get into my car, I leave my home, I go get in my car, I'm going to work, until I log off, I get out of my car and come back in again. I can't be, let's say I get in my car and I get a local job, and then I'm at Heathrow Airport sitting around for 3 hours waiting for the next job. And technically what Uber's saying, I'm not working, but I am working. And that's what the court ruled. So that's what we're trying to push for. And at the same time, it's also about making sure, like what Uber announced, is we also get paid expenses. How do they calculate these expenses? So the HMRC rate is 45p a mile. But don't forget, that's for anyone and everyone. Now, in Uber's case, the Uber drivers, they have commercial cars, they have high and reward insurance. That's what it's called. It's commercial insurance. Now, that could cost 3 times the amount of a private insurance. So you also get your MOT twice a year. So you got all these like double, triple expenses. So that rate is not right. So that's something like as a union we'll be pushing forward and trying to do. But the main thing is, it's not just Uber. This trade has been exploited for years. And one of the problems behind that is the regulators such as Transport for London have failed to regulate. So there's like companies like other big operators now that come into the market, like Ola, Bolt. And we also have, like in London, Addison Lee. And we already have a case going on in Northampton against a local, the biggest cab firm, traditional cab firm, Bounce Taxis. And again, because of our ruling, we should be able to win that as well on the same grounds. But it's the whole stuff, like the campaigning will continue. And I think a lot of these operators just still think they could get away with it. And it's also about trying to put a flaw in the market, because the trade is going down and down every day. Yeah. So for us guys, and as a union, what's different between us and other unions is we're more focused on the data side. So we're working with Workers Info Exchange, which is James Bowers' organization, a separate organization, where we're trying to use data and try and make sure that's part of the collective bargaining. So we want to have a data trust there. It makes it a lot easier for us to understand what's happening, like how the jobs are dispatched, how they're getting paid, the time they're working, all that kind of stuff, and if there's any discrimination and all that. So, that's the next way for us. And last month, or basically 3 weeks ago, we won a case in Amsterdam against Ola and Uber for this data transparency. So let's say these companies turn around and say they're going to obey the law. But it's so easy for them to hide everything behind this technology and tweak it and program it in a certain way where people like myself or other drivers would not understand what's happening. So that's something that we're working on. And because we also represent couriers, we have a lot of Deliveroo and Uber Eats riders that are members, and that's something that we're looking for with them. So you're going to see more and more, even though at the moment everyone talks about the private hire drivers or the Uber drivers, you're going to, over the coming days or coming months, you're going to see more and more ADCU on the courier section. So that's the next market that we're going for. So a lot of exciting things coming.
Busy times. Yeah, it's interesting here you speak about, you hear about the sort of conditions that people face in Uber and these industries in general. And then you just sort of try and match that up with what Uber is saying about, after this case, after this ruling, when they were saying, oh, drivers don't want this, drivers don't want a minimum wage, they want the flexibility or whatever. And it's just, it's such a, like, when you hear them, the conditions that people are actually facing in real life, you can easily see how ridiculous that argument is. So yeah, that's interesting, and I guess that's mostly from a legal perspective, what you're doing, and is that sort of the main thing that you guys are doing at the moment?
No, as a union, like day to day, we help drivers on a day to day, like the bread and butter issue, and that's the licensing. So no one really talks about it. So we like the biggest licensing council, and where our stronghold is in London. So every day we get drivers getting their license revoked or some kind of notice or issues with TfL. So on a day-to-day, we help people with their license renewal. So when they're trying to apply for a renewal, and they're having some kind of issue, we get involved, we help them. So last week alone, we had good coverage on ITV for one of our members, Imran, who had his license revoked back in October. And that is to do with facial recognition. And the problem he had is he suddenly grew a beard and Uber's facial recognition failed him. And as a result of that, he got reported to TfL. They revoked his license. And the good thing about it was he was a member of our union. So we were able to go to TfL and help him get his license back. And Uber did admit there was an error and apologize. But that's the thing we do on a day-to-day, like helping people get their license back. And it just goes to show, like, someone like Imran, he was not able to work for 3 months. Yeah. At the same time, he was accused of something very serious, like he was potentially letting someone else drive or use his app to work, which wasn't the case. So what we're seeing is a lot of drivers getting deactivated from the platform and then being reported to TfL. And if you look at that article or that coverage that ITV News done, Microsoft did admit that there is a problem with this facial recognition, but particularly around the BME community, the black people or colored people or people of color. So a lot of the drivers come from that background, like whether they're from Pakistan, Bangladesh, or Somalia, like colored people. So they're innocent. So all they're doing is trying to log on, they get in their car, they turn the app on, and for some reason the facial recognition would fail. And then they're suddenly losing their job. And not just their job, they're also getting their license revoked, which meant they now got to go into court and try and explain to the magistrate court why their license shouldn't be revoked. Now, from experience, like I've been doing this for 7 years dealing with drivers, one of the problems we have at the magistrate court is, it's like a racist system where workers don't tend to have a strong chance unless you have legal representatives there fighting your case for you. And we do see a lot of drivers trying to go in there and represent themselves, and all they do is end up losing their livelihood. So as a union, that's something that we're focused. So there are a lot of unions out there, but they don't specialize in helping people with their licensing issue, where we're also fighting like Uber, but on a day-to-day, we're helping people with their licensing. So from a driver's perspective, it's pointless me fighting Uber if I can't help save his livelihood, like license. And that's where we got it right. And we don't just do it ourselves. We got experts like solicitor firm that we deal with on day to day who do the licensing. So we just pay the solicitors and they do it all. It's not on a pro bono or anything like that. It's just, this is where the union money goes into making sure the members have the service they need when they need it the most.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very interesting. So what do you think is kind of what do you think is sort of a long-term strategy for kind of basically, I mean, this is what we're doing for like on the day-to-day. What do you think is kind of a long-term strategy for basically, I guess, getting Uber and getting companies like Uber to abide by these, what they are obligated to abide to, by law, you know?
I mean, there's three things, like there's a lot of things we need. One, it really comes to grassroots organizing, shoe leather organizing, whatever word you want to use. People like people, and the workers as in workers. So the reason why we were successful, whether it's James or myself, is the workers knew us. We spent time with them. We engaged with these communities, you know. So that was the key element of our organizing structure. And secondly, like being consistent. And then you do need to take some legal action. And at the same time, you also need that political influence, background, or pressure to, you know, achieve what we're trying to achieve in order to make changes. Now, you know, like I see a lot of people, you know, like unions and leaders, etc. But one thing that we're focused on is making sure we could empower the workers. And all our union, like majority of our members are from the BME communities. Yeah. So, and I've been around for a little while, like 7 years. And like I said, my background doesn't come from the trade union. It's not like I was born into this. Yeah. So I learned the hard way. Now, if you look at my father, he was a factory worker and he didn't speak good English. But when I sit with him and his mates, and when they talk about the days, you know, like the strike days, when they used to, you know, set up a picket line outside the factories, they used to have shops to it. And these were done by the bigger unions. Yeah, so I'm talking about GMB, Unite, RMT. So they, you can't knock them. They did something. You know, they set up the structure in terms of the trade union movement. And we owe it, like from coming from that BME background, where like, and the Sadiq Khan often talked about it, his dad was a bus driver. So we owe it to the bigger trade unions that were around for years because they set the structure for us. Yeah. But someone like my dad, the shop steward would tell him, look, this is wrong, what's happening, let's do it right. And they were together, they had that unity. So collectively, they would walk out and they'll stand outside and shut the place down. And the bosses, even though they were like English white people, highly educated, and then they had a group of migrant workers working for them that barely spoke English, they were scared of them. Why? Because they knew they could shut down their business, not because they knew the law, because they could shut down their business. Where if you now look at me, it wasn't like that Uber was scared that I'm going to be holding a protest out there outside their office. You know, I had to run a lengthy battle. So I'm not saying that. So you got to look at the both side of the coin here. If you could get that power, you don't need to go through that lengthy battle. So everyone talks about the gig economy, how everything now changed, you know, and it makes it harder to organize union. And that's where the bigger unions sort of stuck to the traditional side and carried on organizing where they did. And they sort of neglected this sector, and whether it's deliberate or whatever, or because they thought, look, we don't have time, we don't want to organize. And that's where we came in and we organized. And what happened is we smashed that barrier. People were scared to join unions within the private hire industry. People didn't know what a union was, you know, and these drivers, they're isolated. Where do you go? Like, they don't have a fixed place of work. Now we're getting calls, like 10 calls, 20 calls a day of drivers saying, how do I join a union? They found us. Why? Because we smashed, you know, like what I'm trying to say is there was a time when people used to talk about how do you organize these drivers. Now the question is, the drivers are all lined up. We've got a queue of drivers signing up.
Yeah, no, I think so. I think what we think here at Counterfire is that basically the way that you fight back against these things is by building up this kind of collective power, and which has to start in the workplaces and it has to start in the communities, and it can't be something that's just confined to like a trade union structure or whatever. It has to be drivers actually going out and taking the matters into their own hands and sort of building up their own collective power through basically coming into confrontation with these sort of things themselves. And that's why we think it's so important, the work that you guys are doing. And yeah, you have a full support. Thank you very much for speaking to us today.
No worries. Thank you.
Thank you very much.